Welcome to the Flynn Effect podcast, where we dive deep into all things culture, industry news, and history, all with the goal of helping our clients to perform better. Welcome to the podcast, Craig Henderberg, supervising producer here at Flynn, longtime editor, coming up on 20 years in just a few days, actually, which is kind of insane, but very happy to have you. You're normally behind the camera, and I have convinced you to be in front of the camera this time. How are you feeling?
It's not my favorite place to be.
No.
But, we'll see how it goes.
Now you know the rest of our pain when you guys are like, it's fine. It'll be fine. Just act normal. And you're like, okay.
Once you get into it, it is fine for everybody. Once you get going, and you have to ignore everything else in the room that's going on.
And this environment's really easy. Every time we're asking somebody to be on the podcast, they always get really nervous. They're like, I'm going to sound stupid. I'm like, I just go with it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Very casual. You're a great editor. You'll cut out the stuff that sounds super stupid.
Yes, it'll be a very short
episode. And we'll go
episode.
from there. Well, we're going to focus on you today. I want to talk a little bit about just career path and what you've experienced here. Video production and editing is a space that I feel like is changing so rapidly. We have conversations all the time about what's going on in this space. And so figured we'd give people a little peek behind the curtain.
Sure.
But to get started, as I said, you've been here for about 20 years. Just out of curiosity, what brought you here originally, and maybe what's kept you here so long?
Well, what brought me here originally was I was at a very small production company that had been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of on its end of its life. The owner was way past retirement. And so I was looking for other opportunities in Rochester to be an editor, and you had a job posted and I applied for it. And oddly enough, John Marinetti, who hired me for this job way back in his early years, worked at the same company I was at.
Yeah.
And at the place he was before Flynn, he had hired our editor away. So that was how I kind of got the opportunity to start editing.
Yeah.
And get the experience to then apply for here. So it's
John
almost like
opening doors
John
for
created
you over and over.
created the opportunity for me before he even knew he was doing it.
I love that.
So I wasn't really focused on marketing or working at an ad agency.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, 20 years ago, Flynn, or Martino Flynn then, really was one of the very few, if not the only agency to have true edit suites, true editing capabilities in-house. So it wasn't a place I was actually looking to apply for an editing job. It just, came up in the search. So ended up here, and, ad agencies are fun places to work most of the time. And so I just kind of stayed with it. I've liked working with John and, with Chris and Kevin and Ray at the time and everyone else that was at Flynn.
Yeah.
And so just kind of stayed with it.
Well, and I think one thing that's nice about being in an ad agency, and I tell this to people who, if I do informational interviews or if people are coming from client side to agency side, like every day is different. Sometimes that's challenging, but it does keep it really interesting. Like you're always working on new clients and new industries. And so, it's not like you're having to do the same thing over and over again, which I imagine while you're staring at, the milliseconds creep by on the screen, it makes a difference.
Yeah, that is fun. And for our role here in the agency, we get to work on pretty much every client.
Mm-hmm.
I think almost every client that we have or have had has done some sort of video component.
Yeah.
Right? Where some of the creative team or the account team, they only work on certain clients, but we get to have different things to do every day, but also get to work with every client that comes through the agency. So that helps keep it interesting and fun.
Okay. So when you think back to when you first started, and it's funny, I have like vivid memories of even when I would come like visit when I was in high school and college and, I did an internship. The way we would talk about the editing suite was so interesting because it was a differentiator back then to have the actual technology in-house that was needed. Now you can do a lot on your phone, a ton on a laptop, and if you've got the right equipment, you can do a great job. But I guess that's kind of a parallel to how much things have changed in the editing world over the years. So what has that been like for you as someone who's, had to keep up with it over these past 2 decades?
Well, for the software in particular, I talk about it like a car. If you know how to edit,
Yeah.
you can get into any software and figure it out. You just got to find out where the buttons are, just like driving
Sure.
a Honda versus a Ford
It's just a
or
different
whatever.
interface.
Yeah, it's just an interface thing. So it's really about having that creative skill behind you and then learning all these different pieces of software.
Mhm.
It takes time and they each have their own learning curve, but um, we've gone through probably 5 or 6 different main editing systems here at Flynn in the
Mhm.
time that I've been here. Um, so you have that aspect of it, but then you also have every time there's a new technology, a new plugin, a new capability, you've got
Yeah.
to learn that too. And with everything getting faster and faster and more accessible, it does add to the amount of stuff that you just have to
Yeah.
know how to work and operate. And in my role here as well, I'm kind of the engineer. So it's not just knowing how to operate it, but knowing how to get it working and knowing how to build an edit suite and all these other things. So
Right.
I've kind of done all those steps throughout the time here, and but it all builds on each other. So you kind of take
Yeah.
something you learn here and you apply it there, and it helps to keep on top of all the changes.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really fair point because in video production and editing, right? Like there's this balance between storytelling that has to be done and the technical side of it, right? Like what you're technically doing from an editing perspective. Like how do you approach that, I guess? Or like do you come from a story first place or what does your process look like?
I would probably come from a story first place myself because I became an editor because I wanted to really work on movies and
Mhm.
more on the Hollywood side of
Yes. We
things and
we
the
talk about TV
narrative.
and movies often.
Yes, we do. And I ended up I stayed in Rochester because my wife didn't want to leave the area,
Yeah.
so there were limited opportunities to work on movies here.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up again in advertising doing editing. But I think the story is the most important part of
Mhm.
anything because if whether it's a 3-hour movie or a 30-second commercial, if you're not interested in it, if it's not
Yeah.
engaging, people are not going to pay attention or stick with it or care
Right.
about it. So
Right.
so I think you have to come from a story side first and then you use the technical side to enhance what you're doing,
Yeah.
add production value, make it more interesting, whether that's with effects or interesting techniques that you're adding in,
Right.
just to keep the viewer engaged.
I feel like the best example of that, well, we also talk about like Broadway musicals a lot because we both have an interest in that. I know as your kids have gotten older, you've gotten more ingrained in that world. A really great example of that though is Wicked. Okay. So Wicked's like 3 hours, 2.5 hours, something
Yeah.
like that. It doesn't feel like that because they're weaving an awesome story the entire time. And I feel like the same thing applies when you're selling something. A lot of times clients think, okay, well, if I have a 5-minute video, I can tell everything. And it's like, yeah, but it might not be engaging. And if that first minute isn't rock solid, then people aren't going to be watching through the entire thing anyway. So you have to find a way to hook them and keep them watching. And I think it's harder than people think is telling a great story.
Yeah, it is. And even when you have unlimited time, it is. And then when
Yeah.
you're putting the parameters around it of a 60 or a 30 or 15,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
it gets even more difficult. And we always say if you're trying to tell them everything, you're probably telling them nothing because
Right.
there's just too much information there to retain. I always feel like 1 or 2 key points are a lot more effective than trying to get your entire brand positioning into one 30-second spot.
Sure.
And it's that story side of it as well. Sometimes you just it's a vibes thing,
Hmm.
right? And I don't even need to know what sets you apart. If I like your brand and I
Right.
like the story you're telling and kind of the vibe I get from your spot, I'm gonna engage more and find out more after the fact.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, we see that all the time with commercials, right? That you're kind of like, you're not really talking about the product, like, but it doesn't really matter. It might be memorable or entertaining or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
heartwarming, and, it draws people in either way.
I do think it is a function of the time we are in, whether that's people's attention spans being
Yeah.
shorter or just what everyone's used to engaging with because I like to watch movies in
Yeah.
my spare time and I will bounce back and forth from new releases to old stuff that I haven't seen or maybe haven't seen in a while.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really obvious. You watch an old movie and it's like the first 10 minutes. I've got so much character development, so much story development, and you learn it not just through what's being said,
Mhm.
but through what you're seeing and everything on screen.
Yeah.
But then I go to newer movies and they're longer,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's like so much exposition of just everybody saying everything out loud
Yeah.
multiple times. And is it like, did we do this because we're expecting someone to be on their phone and maybe missing two or
Yeah.
three of these explanations of what's going on and why we're here and who these people are? So I think you can take that same idea and apply it to the shorter lengths and
Yeah.
to whatever your marketing is, and just again keep it engaging, give them the information,
Yeah.
and look for other ways to communicate what you're trying to communicate without it all having to be in the voiceover or in text on
Right.
screen.
Right.
You
Sometimes
know,
it can be the feeling that you're evoking.
right? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Totally agree. It's funny you say that. There was some influencer, I want to say it was like Tinks, which probably means nothing to you. However, when she watches new movies, she gives them like a phone rating, meaning how much was I on my phone during this? And if it's, if you're not on it at all, like it was a really engaging movie. And I do think that's kind of how people gauge things
Yeah,
now is
right.
how much did I have to sit on my cell phone? But yeah, I mean, especially during commercial breaks, when people are watching TV, I do think people automatically pick up other stuff. So you have to find ways to break through.
Yeah.
Well, moving on, next question. Um, every role comes with its challenges, right? So I thought we could just take a moment to talk about like what does that look like for you? What do you find is the biggest hurdle in your world? Whether that be something recent or something that comes up again and again. Just so we could maybe, give some advice to folks about how to approach things like that in their roles.
An interesting part of being more of the producer side of things than the editor
Yeah.
is that role has a lot of overlap with other roles in the agency because you're you're dealing with the financial side of things. You're a little
Mm-hmm.
bit account service because sometimes you're the liaison
Welcome.
with the client, right? Um, and you're working with the creative and doing the creative at the same time. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of multi-function there where you really have to understand all those different parts of the process and the
Mm-hmm.
job to do that well. I also think, it's hard. Creative and especially marketing is, I think the hardest part of that is that everybody has an opinion and
Wildly
everybody
subjective.
wants to give their opinion on things.
Yeah.
And sometimes whether it's needed or not. And sometimes we say, well, are we making it better now or are we just making it different? And it's
Yeah.
hard to have those conversations with your clients and your colleagues. And so
Right.
it's deciding when is the right time to push back on something
Mm-hmm.
that you really feel strong about is making it worse, maybe.
Yeah.
And when to go, okay, I can, it's not how I would have done it, or I certainly like this better.
Yes.
But I can make that change because at the end of the day, you do want the client to be happy. So it's finding that balance of, again, when to push back and when not to,
Yeah.
and also how to have those conversations effectively so
Totally.
you don't come off as someone who's just difficult
Right.
or,
Being a pain.
cranky, right? Or super egotistical. Like a good
We're
idea can come
territorial,
from
right?
everybody.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, we come from such a collaborative place as an agency, but it doesn't mean that there's not healthy tension. And sometimes
Right.
people have really strong opinions about what the right approach is, but it's not like a yes or no clear answer. It's just somebody's opinion on what they think will work better.
Yeah.
I think something you just said is a really good point, and it's something that I don't actually remember who first said it to me, but it was a piece of like management advice, which is it wrong or is it just not how you would do it? And those are two very, very
Right.
different things. I try to weigh those things when I'm looking at creative or anything that we're doing here too, because you're right. You don't want to come off as, where it's your way or the highway. But sometimes one of us around here has, I don't know,
Yeah.
a reason for pushing back on
Right.
something like that.
And I think the really challenging ones are when you don't have a good reason or one that you can
Yeah.
articulate. I'm a drummer, or I've been a drummer at least in my past. So, and I think editing has a lot of rhythm and pacing to it
Yeah.
for sure. And sometimes it just feels better to me,
Yeah.
right? The way we have it versus the way someone wants to change it to. And
Yeah.
it's hard to make an argument or a case for that,
Yeah.
So You just have to go, I just like it
Yeah.
better the other way. And
I just
sometimes you
like
just bite
it.
your tongue and go,
I know.
okay, we can do that.
Isn't that funny? I
Yeah.
know. I really try hard not to be like, I just don't like it.
Yeah. But
Sorry.
that's a valid response, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what we talked about at the beginning of if someone's not into something or
Yeah.
vibing with it, they're not going to stick with it. So that is actually a great piece of feedback
Yeah.
of I just don't like it. And um we don't always need a solution either. It's
Right.
sometimes just identifying the part that's not working
Yeah.
for you. And if you have a reason, that's great. But the reason is great, but let us think about how to solve that,
Yeah.
right?
Come to the table with creative solutions.
Yeah.
Totally. Okay, that's awesome. Now, current landscape, and I know this is something you and I have talked about lots, so I have an assumption of where you'll go on this answer, but trends in the video world that you've been paying attention to.
Yeah, well, it's 2025, so obviously we have to talk about AI.
AI,
Yeah,
yes.
the number one thing. AI is interesting because there's been little bits and pieces of it that have kind of been part of the workflow over the last few years,
Yeah.
and the generative AI explosion that we've seen, because that technology just took a huge leap recently,
Yes.
and it keeps growing. It's definitely a challenge from, you got to learn all these different companies are coming out with their version of it.
Yeah.
So
Like
it's
every 5
identifying, yeah,
seconds.
which one do we work with? Which one is the best? And usually it's not one, it's usually a combination of things to
Yeah.
get where you need to go. So it's putting that recipe together to get there, but
Yeah.
it's also made things more accessible for our clients, from a standpoint of they can do things themselves,
Right.
or they do something very quickly in AI and then expect that we can also do things just as quickly.
Mhm.
So that sometimes leads to, price pressure for us
Right.
or time turnaround. Like, oh, this takes a week. No, what if you use AI? Can't you do it in 2 days? Right.
Yeah.
But it's not a perfect mix that way because there's still a lot of creative thinking that has to go into what you're getting. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of like cross your fingers and hope you're getting what you want when you
Right.
type in a prompt and get something back.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this analogy a lot recently of, what is the right analogy for AI in our world with clients
Yeah.
and creatives? And this is where I landed on. You could tell me if it's working or not, but
Okay. Hit me.
it's the difference between, like, if I go to a potluck, right? I take a scoop out of the neighbor's crock pot and it
Okay.
it might be really good
Yeah.
and I'll go back for seconds, or
Yeah.
it might be like 10% cat hair. I don't know.
Ew.
I'm going to find out, but I know what I'm getting into when I go to that event,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
I If I go to the Bear for dinner,
Yeah.
right? I'm expecting a lot different things to come down on the table for me to eat, right?
Yes.
So to be on my plate, I should say. So it's kind of like if a client does something on their own, it's kind of like that potluck analogy where this is I don't know what I'm going to get, and
Yeah.
if it's really
You
good,
might get
you're
something
excited about it.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. And if it's not, who cares? But when it's coming from an agency that you expect great things from,
Yeah.
right? You lose some of that forgiveness that you need to have with AI at this point because
Right.
you don't have control over everything
Yeah.
that's coming out of it.
Or
So
you need to allow for that extra, whatever it is, je ne sais quoi, that the agency applies to it to
sure,
get it to the next level.
right,
Yeah.
yes. So your expectations of what you're going to get are different. So I
Hmm.
think you appreciate it in different ways depending on where it's coming from.
Sure.
And the biggest challenge for us is that AI still struggles with very specific feedback.
Hmm.
I found for me that the first couple things I get
Yeah.
are usually the best ones.
I
And
agree.
when I start trying to ask it to correct specifics
Yeah.
within those things,
It
it,
ruins
it
other
doesn't
stuff.
understand how to do it yet.
Yeah.
It's going to get there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're
I
not there
agree.
yet, and that's what makes it a little challenging
Yeah.
because it's a great tool, but you have to be ready to accept some trade-offs with
Yeah.
it.
I think the other thing is that much like what you were talking about earlier with the different technologies is there might be one AI tool that's really great at voiceover generation and one that's really great at avatars and one that's really great at background filling in, and but it doesn't seem like there's like one end all be all solution right now that can kind of do it all. And so again, then you become this sort of like procurer of all of these different tools that have to be brought together, which just takes time and energy. It might mean that that thing that you're creating, the voiceover, for example, gets generated really, really quickly once you do it. But then you're having to go find all these other parts and pieces and kind of put them all together. It just still takes effort. So I think that's another thing too, is yes, there are parts of it that save time, but there are also parts of it that are adding time in different ways than, the traditional process.
Yeah. And voiceover is a good example too, because this is all an algorithm and there's a lot of randomness
Mm-hmm.
or chaos built in.
Mm-hmm.
We've gotten voiceovers that are great. We're like, this is amazing. And you do it the exact same way
Yeah.
with the exact same, AI talent. And on the next one, and you're like, well, this isn't good.
Yeah.
Why didn't it work the same way again? So
Yeah.
it's hard to get that consistency
Mm-hmm.
out of AI. And I think the most interesting, you know, AI TV spots or examples that I've seen are usually short clips,
Yeah.
and they usually don't have a lot to do with each other, or there's one unifying element within them, but
Yeah.
a lot of the rest of it changes because I think that consistency is what is really
Yeah.
still on the horizon for it.
Yeah, and I think there's just a little bit of a lack of understanding of nuance, right? Like if it's just one tiny thing you're trying to change, like it's still going to go back and reread that whole thing.
Yeah.
So I totally hear that. It's a challenging landscape, but it's also fun. It's fun to play around with.
Yeah.
And I do think from an inspiration perspective, when clients go and try things and say, here's sort of what was in my head, but like you guys go make it better. It can be helpful too, just from a directional standpoint.
Yeah, it's great for concepting. It's great for idea generation.
Yeah.
And if you get lucky enough that what you come up with can end up as the final product as well, that's great.
Yeah. Well, is it even an episode of the Flynn Effect if we don't talk about AI? I don't
No.
think so. Okay, last question.
Okay.
What, and let's keep it, PC for the audience here. What's your favorite memory of working on a shoot or a video, anything like that, over the past 20 years?
Favorite is what the favorite is the tough word.
Where is
But the
this
one
going?
I don't know if it's my favorite, but the
Yeah.
one I always think about is we did a shoot for Dick's Sporting Goods for a Father's Day spot in New
Yeah.
York City. And we went, and the plan was we were shooting on film. I think it might be one of the last things we shot on actual film. And we were going to shoot on film. I was going to get like a quick digital intermediate to start working on all day. And then the plan was that we had a freelance editor in New York that was going to work through the night.
Yeah.
And then I was going to pick up the next day because this had to turn around very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And what ended up happening is I did work on it all day. And then the night just kept going on and I never actually got to stop. We ended up having both of us work at the same time to come up with 3 or 4 different edits by, I don't know, 4 or 5 in the morning. And I remember going back to the hotel with Chris and he's like, all right, go get some sleep. Don't worry. I will not bug you before 10 o'clock. Right. And I think it was 6:30 or 7 when my phone rang and he's like, we have feedback. I need you awake. So I slept for like 3 hours. Then we kept editing during the day. And then I had to check out of my room because I was flying back that night.
Yeah.
And I just remember walking through like the Apple store on Fifth Avenue, just in a complete daze because Chris lost his charger and we needed to go get a new one. So, that
sounds right.
Whole shoot. And there's some other aspects of that I won't share on the podcast, but that whole, 36-hour adventure kind of stands out.
You were probably recovering for about a week after that.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that feels like an old advertising, old production kind of story that you don't get as much nowadays. So that's why it always sticks out for me.
No, it is because I can't imagine asking someone to do that now. Like, I just don't think I would feel right about it.
I don't think I could do it now,
Yeah.
When you're
there's no way I could.
less than 30, you can handle those types of things. But
maybe.
now,
Definitely not
these
post
days,
kids.
these days it's not happening.
All right, Craig. Well, this is great. Thank you for sharing a little bit of insight into what you do every day. And, we'll be behind the camera.
Yeah.
So waving to you from afar. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.